Hello everyone and welcome to another video. For today's video we're going to be re-entering the world of miniature consoles. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know I'm quite keen on these little devices. I've got a few myself. I've got the SNES Classic, the A500 Mini, the TurboGrafx Classic and the original Mega Drive Mini. Which leads me straight into what we are going to be talking about today, and that is Sega's new Mega Drive Mini 2, which is based on the second version of the original Mega Drive, or the Genesis if you're American. So I suppose the initial question is, why a Mega Drive Mini 2? Why not make a miniature console based on the Saturn or the Dreamcast or the Master System? And it's a very good question. There's been a few sort of things bandied about. I guess the Saturn and the Dreamcast are said to be quite expensive to produce a miniature console for, and maybe a bit more difficult than going back to the Mega Drive, which there is still a hell of a lot of games left there to take a look at. And one of the interesting things about this is that this actually contains a number of Mega CD games. Indeed, what you actually get here is, let me just check my notes, you get 60 games in total on this thing. 41 of them are your standard Mega Drive games, you've got 12 Mega CD games, and 7 bonus games, some of which are quite interesting. Now, as mentioned, this is based on the second revision of the Mega Drive hardware. The original Mega Drive, if you're in the UK, released in 1990. It had previously been released in 88 in Japan, 89 in America, and then 1990 in the UK. The Mega Drive 2 was released in 1993, and the whole thing with that, it was a different kind of shell. It had a smaller AV port, supported stereo sound, it consumed less power, and it didn't have a headphone port, but by and large it was the same system. Now, personally, while I like the look of the Mega Drive 2, I do prefer the original shape for it, but you can kind of see why in 1993 they released a hardware revision, I guess. Let's check my notes there again. So the original Mega Drive Mini came out in 2019. It's been a couple of years of speculation of what Sega might do next. It was very successful. It did really well as miniature consoles go. So there was always a question: would they do the Saturn or the Dreamcast? Now, like I say, they've gone back to the Mega Drive. They've got 60 titles on this thing for us to play around with, because as you can see, the Mega Drive had a vast library. It was a system that sold 30 million. It was hugely successful. Indeed, when I was younger, a hell of a lot of people had them. So, let's just have a quick look at it. So this is your Mega Drive Mini 2. So what you get there, 2 USB ports on the front for your controllers, your power switch, your reset button, and as with the first one, you get a little cartridge slot up top, which actually you can press in. I've had a few people actually ask, can you use Mega Drive cartridges on it? Which obviously you can't, because the thing itself is about the size of a Mega Drive cartridge. But, you know, it's a good question, because the A500 Mini and the C64 Mini, you can put stuff into play original things. On the back, HDMI port and a USB port. It's your standard fare for these miniature consoles. It's the shell, it's the whatever board is inside it with your USB ports and that on there. It's very lovely made. It feels really nice. Again, much like the original Mega Drive Mini, it's very, very well made. I am a big fan of it, even though I'm not fond of this variation of the console. It's still really lovely. Now, just for comparison's sake, I do have a Mega Drive 2 here, because for some reason I have 3 Mega Drives in this house. I've got the original model and I've got 2 Mega Drive 2s. I'm not sure why I have that many. I think it's because they're all broken in some way, but they still work in their own way. So it's kind of nice to have this. But you can see there that the Mega Drive Mini 2 overlaid over a Mega Drive 2. So you can see it's, you know, sized down quite a chunk. So what else do you get in the box? Well, you're not going to be able to play your Mega Drive Mini without one of these. It's the 6-button variation of the controller. It's I remember some of the complaints that came out about the original Mega Drive Mini was that you only got the 3-button controllers. kind of rectified that by giving you a 6-button one. Much like the original Mega Drive controller, it's lovely. I think I've gone on record before as saying the original Mega Drive controller is actually one of my favourite controllers. I just really like the way it feels, I like the way the buttons pop, I like the way the D-pad is. It's just a very, very nice controller. So we'll just get a closer look at that. So you've got your buttons along here, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, lovely D-pad, start button. And then like a shoulder button, which is mode, which on the actual Mega Drive itself performs your going into save state function, which actually is a little bit better than the original Mega Drive Mini, where you had to hold down the start button for a set amount of time. So I really like this controller for that. The other things you get in the box, not quite as cool as the system itself, but you get your standard USB cable for plugging it in. I just plugged it straight from the system into my TV. One of my TV's USB ports powers it absolutely fine. And you get a HDMI cable, just in case you don't have 10,000 of them lying around your flat. I do. I have many HDMI cables because I have many consoles and systems and superfluous stuff. But you can never have enough, never have too many, can you, really? So, now I've had a look at the system. What games do you get on this thing? So it's quite a substantial list taken from the library of the Mega Drive, and I will show off a couple of my favourites, a couple of interesting ones. But like I say, it's divided into 3 sections on the back of the box. You've got your 41 standard Mega Drive games, you've got your Mega CD games, and then you've got some bonus games, which kind of come from interesting places. One of them I found very, very interesting, actually, which I will be showing off when we get to it. But just as a basic rundown, I won't go through all of them, but you've got Afterburner 2 on here, Bonanza Brothers, Clay Fighter, Desert Strike, Return to the Gulf, Earthworm Jim 2, Golden Axe 2, Outrun, Phantasy Star 2, Populous, Rainbow Islands Extra, Rise Star, Rolling Thunder 2, you got Shining Force 2, Shining in the Darkness, Sonic 3D, Streets of Rage 3, Super Hang-On, Super Street Fighter 2, The New Challengers, Revenge of Shinobi, Thunder Force 4, Toe Jam and Earl and Panic on Funkotron, Vector Man 2, Virtua Racing. For the Mega CD side, and I will go through all of these, Echo the Dolphin, Echo the Tides of Time, Final Fight CD, Night Striker, Night Trap, Robo Alest, I can't read this for some reason, Shining Force CD, Sylphied, Sonic the Hedgehog CD, The Ninja Warriors, and Umemi Mystery Mansion. You've got some bonus games on here, Devil NP, Fantasy Zone, Sparta, Space Harrier 2, Star Mobile, Super Locomotive, and Versus Puyo Puyo Sun. So you get quite a lot on here for your money. Now, how much was this? It's about £100, as these things generally are. So quite a lot, but you know, like these systems are about £100 nowadays. Your mileage varies on whether or not you like it. I've always said I'm quite a fan of these little retro systems. I like having this curated list of games. For me, that I like having like the look of the classic hardware. They sit really nice on there, and they're just fun to kind of plug in and play. You can just, you know, spend half an hour or an hour just zipping through a few games, having a bit of fun with it. But speaking of the games, let's actually have a look at a few. When you boot up your Mega Drive Mini 2, you'll see a screen that I think is very familiar to anyone who's used one of these systems. You get your straight-up list of games. You can sort them in a variety of orders, from A to Z, to when they released, to the platform, or just what was most recently played by yourself. If you dig into the options a little bit, there's a few little bits and pieces you can alter. You can get different wallpapers, you can change the size of the screen to either be its sort of 4x3 format or 16:9, stretch it out a bit. Quite interestingly is there is an option under the sound settings to change between the Mega Drive 2 sound options and the Mega Drive 1 sound options. But really, it's just a very easy to use interface. There's no huge bells and whistles here. It's just very simple to plug it in, pick a game, and then you're off. No more, no less. Okay, so first up, I think it's kind of very difficult to talk about any Sega system without talking about its flagship franchise, and that's going to be Sonic the Hedgehog. There are two Sonic games available to you on the Mega Drive Mini 2, Sonic CD and Sonic 3D. We're going to have a look at Sonic CD to begin with. So, Sonic CD was released in 1993. It was originally conceived as an expanded Sonic 2 port. However, apparently slow sales of Sonic 2 in Japan put a halt to those plans and they decided to make a brand new game. This game was in particular the debut of the Amy Rose character and Metal Sonic, and it wasn't developed by what I guess we call the core Sonic team. It was actually developed by a different group of people. I believe while the core Sonic team had finished up Sonic 2 and were probably starting to work towards Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles in the US, this was developed in Japan. So it does have kind of a different feel and flavour compared to what I like to call the core Sonic games, which is Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. Interestingly, in this one there is a time travel mechanic where you go through these star posts labelled past or future, and if you keep up your speed you travel to those locations. So it could be like the past of the zone or the future of the zone. In the past versions you can track down these devices which, if you destroy, will fix the future of that zone, and that is what leads to you getting the good ending in the game. It's a really interesting and kind of unique mechanic, which I don't really think has ever been revisited in a Sonic game, which I guess kind of makes sense, because how would you kind of revisit that, especially in the 3D ones? There were two soundtracks on offer, both of which are available in this collection. You've got like the Japanese soundtrack and the US European soundtracks, both of which offer different sort of flavours, I guess, to the game. Which is quite interesting because this is a game that is very well acclaimed for its soundtrack. It's a very, very good soundtrack. Some really interesting music and expanded sound options on here which take advantage of the Mega CD, which I guess you kind of expect because you're buying this add-on for your Mega Drive, which costs quite a lot of money, and you're buying the game for it, so you want it to take advantage of that. Graphically, there's some 3D visuals in there, or mock 3D visuals, kind of inspired by the Mode 7 stuff, which you kind of see on the SNES as well. Visually, it pops really, really nicely. It's such a colourful game. Gameplay-wise, now, if you follow me on Twitch, you might have watched me play this. There is actually the playthrough on this channel as well. I wasn't as keen on this as the game went on. I kind of felt very much like you just kind of went through the zones, with some of them in particular, like the pinball style ones, being remarkably frustrating. But I didn't feel like you could explore the zones as well as you could Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I didn't feel like the platforming was quite as good as those games were. It was very much you'd hold right, jump when appropriate, kill the enemies when appropriate, but there wasn't much more beyond that. Now that might be a me thing. I know because of the time travel mechanics there is the ability to explore the zone. There is the ability to track down the devices. Because I played it on stream, I wasn't maybe necessarily paying as much attention to that. So it's something I would like to go back and maybe fix that. But it is still a good game, even if I wasn't necessarily as keen on it as I am the core ones. Now you have to remember, I have a lot of love and nostalgia for those core ones. There are people who cite this as one of the best 2D games owing to its gameplay and soundtrack. So I would say absolutely make this one of the first ones you would check out with this system. So the next game I wanted to speak about is one that I have a lot of love and nostalgia for. It's called Desert Strike. It was originally released in 1992 and it's an Electronic Arts game, and it is the first of the Strike series, comprising Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, Urban Strike, Soviet Strike and Nuclear Strike. They kind of ran from 1992 through to 1996 across a variety of systems. The first three releasing on the Mega Drive, the SNES, the Amiga and other home computer systems, with Soviet Strike being on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, Nuclear Strike being on the N64 and the PlayStation. There haven't really been any games in the series since, and it's a shame because I do really love this series, and I would love to see sort of a modern one kind of like as an indie sort of game. But the idea here is quite simple. You start off, you select like a co-pilot for your Apache helicopter, and then you start the game, you're given like a number of objectives and sort of a goal for your mission, and then you can kind of complete the objectives in any order. So as an example, in the first mission, you've got power plants to take out, you've got radar to take out, you've got airfields to take out, and it's advised to do them in the order you're given. But you can go to the airfields first and take them out. You can go to the power plants first and take them out. It could be harder to do it in that way, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, there might be certain time-sensitive things in later missions that might interfere. I know as an example, in Soviet Strike, there's a prisoner of war that gets executed unless you get to them quick enough. So obviously that does play a part. But the premise is really simple. It's like an isometric shoot 'em up. You control this helicopter. It's got 3 types of weapons, like a chain gun, Scud missiles, Hydra missiles, each one varying, you get varied ammo amounts. And you just take out your enemies and blow up buildings, and it's, quite a tough game, really, really fun game. There's little sort of side things you can do, like pick up prisoner of war who have gone missing in action. It's got like a nice arcade quality to it, because as you drain your weapons, you can find additional weapon crates you can pick up dotted throughout the map, or fuel canisters dotted throughout, and armour. And it's really neat and really, really fun. Like I say, it's quite tough. It's definitely a hard game, but there's sort of a trick to it, and once you get used to it and the enemy placements and all that, you find yourself coming back for one more go, and learning the various mechanics of it, and just having a lot of fun with it. Like I say, it's a series that I have a lot of love for, and one that I'd definitely like to see back, and it's really, really nice to see it represented on one of these miniature consoles. So the next game on our list is one that I wasn't really going to talk about, but I think, much like you have to talk about Sonic when it comes to any SEGA system, when it comes to the Mega CD and this early wave of CD-based games, you kind of have to talk about Night Trap. So Night Trap is quite a notorious game. When it came out, it was controversial. It was cited as promoting sexual violence towards women. It was cited as being unsuitable for children. And it, along with games like Mortal Kombat, which was very hyper-violent for the early 90s, were brought up in Senate hearings in the United States, which eventually led to the creation of the ESRB, and why we have age ratings on video games nowadays. So it kind of felt like, even though I didn't necessarily want to talk about it or play it, it felt like I'd have to talk about it for this, because it's got that really interesting legacy. Now, Night Trap came about, obviously, at the start of CD-based games. When CD-based games first became a thing, you had this wave of FMV games. These were sort of like a crossover point between a movie and a video game. There's been a bit of a resurgence in this lately, with games like Her Story and Telling Lies by Sam Barlow. But back then, you had these games coming out that would have actors being shot in being recorded, acting out their lines, and it'd be sort of like an interactive movie where you'd click at the right moment or do the right thing, and it might be like a branching pathway. There's endless discussion on the quality of these games. Some were better than others, some were better acted than others, some are very interesting curiosities. They were sort of a necessary evolution in video games, and Night Trap, for better or worse, is one of them. Now, the premise of this one, you're observing teenage girls having a sleepover in this house. There are several rooms, you have a camera hooked up in each one, and you flip from room to room. Of course, it's kind of a horror slasher type thing, because the house is being invaded by vampires called augurs. And what you have to do is you have to go to the rooms at the right time, and you can trap these vampires. So you go to like the bathroom at 12 seconds, and you see them entering, and you press B at the right time, and it traps them, and they're gone, they're no longer a threat to these girls. I guess the kind of legacy of it lives on in a game like Five Nights at Freddy's, where the premise of that is that you're observing these cameras, and at the right time, right place, you can, you stop the monsters from attacking you. So, despite the mixed reception to it and the controversy and mixed quality of it, it has been cited as one of the worst games made, which I don't know if that's necessarily fair because it's functional enough, but its legacy does kind of live on in modern games. It's a necessary evolution. Personally, I wasn't really that fond of it. It felt very trial and error-y. There wasn't really any logic to it. It was just, if you hit it at the right moment, at the right time, you would get it. And it's just a matter of, I guess, memorising when these things would happen. So, you'd have like a notebook, like the one I've got here, and as you're going through, you'd go, okay, at 12 seconds, these people are entering this, that's when I can trap them. And at this point, there's a conversation here, which tells me the colour of the access code. And at this point, there's like conversations happening between the girls that might unveil some sort of plot. It's certainly interesting. It's a curiosity. I would definitely say check it out. It's not brilliant. I don't think it's as bad as made out to be, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it. I do like adventure games, I like point and click games, but I like them because you solve puzzles. In this, it's just very much, click, right time, right place, do the right thing. So the next game to check out is a game called Star Mobile. This is quite an interesting one. This was originally released on the X68000 computers back, I guess, in the early 90s, late 80s, and a Mega Drive port was made for it. But for one reason or another, it was never announced and it was never released. Now, 30 years later, in 2022, the port has been included on the Mega Drive Mini 2 as a bonus game. And I'm quite glad it is, because it's a really intriguing game. It's got a little bit of that very early 90s weirdness, and when you play it and see it, you'll know exactly what I mean. The premise of the game is that you've got a set of scales, and there's 3 points on each side of the scale. You have stars falling from the sky of different colour, and each one corresponds to a different weight. So the blue ones are like 1 point, the white at 2 points, yellow at 3 points, orange at 4 points, and so on. The other colours in there. What you have to do is you have to position the stars on different points of the scale to try and balance it out and make sure they don't tip over. Now, if you sandwich a star between two of the same colour, you get bonuses for that. If you stack up ones of the same colour, you get bonuses for that. So it becomes quite an interesting challenge trying to figure out where do I place my stars, but also how do I maximise the points I'm going to get. I really, really liked this, and I'm glad for its inclusion. Like I say, I found the visuals to be quite weird, because you've got your set of scales in the front and centre, and your stars falling down. But then, in the background, you've got images of different animals from the zodiac. So it's like, you're playing it, and then in the background you've got like a crab, a goat for Capricorn, or is there a crab zodiac? I don't know. Write in the comments if there is. I can never remember. But you get the idea. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. And like I say, because of the visuals, it's got that early 90s kind of weirdness and quirkiness that you don't really see nowadays. It's like when you look at like a game like Columns, it's a brilliant game, but it's sort of a little bit weird tonally for some reason. They kind of make it more mystical than it is, but I really liked it. It was very challenging and very, very fun, and it's one that you could just throw on quite easily. It's got that sort of casual puzzle game quality to it. So the final game I wanted to look at is a game called Still Feed. Now this is a sort of vertical shooter, but not quite a vertical shooter. You can see from the visuals what I mean by this. I don't quite know how you would describe this style of gameplay, but you've kind of got your ship sort of, at the base level where, it would be in most of these vertical shooters. But as it goes in, it's got like a 3D depth effect where it gets smaller as it goes further towards the screen, gets bigger as it comes towards you, and similar for the enemies. It's quite a striking effect. Now, the original Still Feed was released in 1986 on a number of home computer platforms back over in Japan and that. But this is like a remake for the Mega CD, released in, I think, in 93, 94. It did release to, a very good reception, and it's cited as one of the better Mega CD games, and it does take advantage of it. You've got these, well, lovely backgrounds, which is sort of FMV using pre-rendered computer footage, which really do take advantage of the system, and it's a really fun gameplay loop. I didn't find it too difficult like I do some of these vertical or horizontal shooters, but it wasn't necessarily too easy. It had a right level of challenge for me personally. Now, between the levels, you get to upgrade your ship with extra weapons, which you can attach to either side of it. The story itself is, you're very basic. Terrorists are attacking Earth. You're the last hope. Go forth and shoot many things. How did the terrorists get so many ships? We don't know. Why are they so powerful? We don't know. If they're more powerful, why did they even bother attacking Earth, really? Deep questions that need answering. But it is, joking aside about the plot, it's a good game. It's definitely one I'd recommend checking out. I think it sort of does show what the Mega CD was capable of, and it doesn't look great compared to now, but for the early 90s, it's very impressive, and I found it have quite a fun gameplay loop. And it is cited, like I say, as one of the better Mega CD titles. So we come to sort of the final verdict. What do I think about the Mega Drive Mini 2? I think, as I've probably gone into over the course of this video, I do really like it. I like the curated list of games that they've given you. Not everything's a hit. It can't be. There's 60 titles on here, and, whether or not you like a game, there's always that question of subjectivity versus objectivity, and whether it is opinion or not. It does come down to opinion, I do think, because there are people out there who probably like the most critically lambasted games, and there are people out there who detest the most critically acclaimed games. Yes, there are questions about the technical side of video games, but even then, a technically bad game, you can overcome that and still enjoy it. Like I said, not everything here landed for me. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Sonic CD, but I know there's a lot of love for it, and it's good to have another legal way to play it. And I know obviously the Sonic Origins collection exists, but having more options is never a bad thing. Like I say, you've got some really, really good games on here. It's nice to see Desert Strike on there. It's good to see Earthworm Jim on there. Good to see Rainbow Islands Extra. I love Rainbow Islands. It's a classic game alongside Bubble Bobble that I think many people nowadays don't talk that much about. It's one of those games I think it's such a really joyous arcade game to play. You've got some good RPGs on here. You've got the Shining Force games on here. You've got Shining in Darkness, the original title in that series, which is a really interesting for the time RPG. They're trying to do some new and interesting things. You've got Phantasy Star, you've got Outrun, which is a great driving game. And then you've got your collection of Mega CD games. Like I mentioned before, you got Sonic CD on here. You've got that Sylphide, which I really enjoyed and would definitely recommend. You've got the notorious ones like Night Trap, which again, I wasn't necessarily keen on, but I know people do enjoy it. And maybe if I keep, trying it and revisiting it, maybe I will enjoy it, sort of the same way you enjoy film and Mystery Science Theater. But overall, I think it's a really, really good package. I would definitely recommend looking into it and checking it out. Obviously, I know it's expensive. £100 is a lot of money at any time. So, like a lot of these retro consoles, there's always going to be questions floated about it. You could, in theory, emulate. Obviously, that's dodgy, ground legally, and for a lot of the casual audience, it's not necessarily that easy to set up the emulated side of things. But for those of you who don't want that kind of faff, who are looking for a bit of a nostalgia hit, I would recommend this. Obviously, a lot of the big hits were done on the original Mega Drive Mini, but I think there's a lot of good gems on here that people could have a lot of good fun with. And I think there are some games here that people will have a fondness for anyway. Things like your Toe Jam and Earl on Planet Funkotron, the aforementioned Rainbow Islands, Desert Strike, Afterburner 2, like I said, Sonic CD, Sylphide, even Sonic 3D. I know there's a lot of love for that one as well. There's some curiosities on here, there's some great games on here, so I would definitely recommend checking it out. And with that, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. It's always really, really appreciated. Give the quick video a like if you would like to. Leave a comment. Let me know if you've got one of these and what you think. Let me know your favourite Mega Drive or Genesis games. I'm always intrigued to hear about that. And I shall see you again in the next video. Goodbye.